Hello, and thanks for joining today's webinar hosted by OpenEnvoy in collaboration with the Shared Services and Outsourcing Network. I'm Naomi Secor, Global Managing Director of the SSON, and I am delighted to introduce this session. We're diving into the critical topic of customer success as the key to your AP automation journey. Just before we kick off, a couple of housekeeping items. During the session, we invite you to ask questions by simply clicking the Q&A tab, which is located at the bottom of your console. We also invite you to visit the Resource Center, where you're going to find a white paper which dives deep into the four-phase journey of AP automation, really helpful to reinforce the learnings you're going to take away today. And feel free to connect with our speakers. I've placed their information right on the console. So let's move into the discussion. We have two great speakers with us today, Samantha Moran, who's the head of customer success at OpenEnvoy. Samantha started her career in intensive care nursing. She learned deep listening and assessment skills, which have helped her become a successful customer success leader, who she is today. And we have Matt Cohen, the VP of Finance at Bliss Point Media. Matt oversees the finance and accounting function and has led systems implementations, including ERP, AP technology, accounting, and finance. Welcome both. Thank you so much for being here, and over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Naomi. So as she said, I'm Samantha Moran, and just to give you a little bit of context on, my relationship with Matt Cohen, who's on the line with me today. Bliss Point Media is a customer of OpenEnvoy. We've been working together, through the sales process prior to this, but as a customer since October. And, we've been going through the onboarding journey and just thought it was a great chance to kind of stop and share a little bit about how that journey has gone for us together. So it's very fresh, and we're talking about this in real time. So I want to kind of kick things off, Matt, with a little bit of context before your journey started with us at OpenEnvoy. So tell me, how you began to consider AP automation for your team.
Absolutely, and thank you again for having me here today. At Bliss Point Media, it is an advertising technology agency that has really been experiencing, I think, hockey stick growth is the word people like to use these days. So when I joined about 4.5 years ago, we were looking at 200 to 300 bills a month. As of last month, we had over 3,000. And so as we watch the growth of the company and the number of bills grow, it was the natural progression to start looking for ways to not only increase or decrease the time spent, but to increase the accuracy and turnaround time to make sure that we have the resources to support the rest of the organization as it grows and make sure, vendors get paid, because that's an important part of business.
Absolutely, yeah. And I thought, I remember at the time when you came to us, like, it aligned quite well with, what we focus on with customers on, operational efficiency, actually saving time for your team so they can focus on, value additive tasks instead of like combing through all these bills. You had designed a pretty great process on your own without inserting the automation piece, and I know that you were pretty forward-thinking in thinking about implementing that and taking it to the next level. So I thought that was quite smart. But I know that because you had a process that was working, you wanted to be really careful in thinking about which vendor you would use. So did you consider other options, and what were the most important things in your mind when deciding which vendor to move forward with, or having the trust to go ahead and move forward with OpenEnvoy?
Absolutely, and you really hit the nail on the head there, that we have a process that works today, and it will scale. It'll require more hours and more people, but we have a scalable process today. One core tenet of being in the tech space is to look into the future and see what it's going to be like and try to figure out how can we do this better. I think you said always looking at it through the lens of how can we be better. And so without naming names, there were definitely other payables solutions in the mix, but none of them quite addressed I don't know if we're unique in that respect, but none of them addressed the issues that Bliss Point Media runs into. We're adding 50 to 100 vendors a month. They all send us bills differently. They all do things a little bit differently, and we really needed a solution that was flexible. And so OpenEnvoy's, I think it's pretty unique mix of the technical side of things where there are human being auditors involved in many steps of the process, as well as the AI, where once a vendor is set up, it learns, it's good to go. And so that's the technology side of things. On the flip side, there is the human side of things. I have been through a good number of software implementations, and a really key piece that I look for is the strength of the technical team on the software side, where if you get a bad implementation partner, that's a death knell for the software and for the initiative. And so, Sam, I'm sure you remember getting put through the ringer early on before we even signed a contract, because we wanted to make sure that everybody knew what they were getting into. Because again, it's complicated, it's high volume, and it's a long-term relationship. And so we really wanted to be sure that everybody knew what they were getting into. And you guys obviously did a really great job, because here we are today.
Well, I appreciate that, Matt. It's a high compliment coming from you, because I do know that you had pretty high standards when taking this on. And
that's a very nice way to say that I'm crazy, but I'll take it.
I appreciate the way that you hold your vendors to a level of excellence. So there were two kind of things that you called out there, one being on the technology side, and then on the implementation side specifically. So before we dive, further into the team that you're working with and the implementation part, the technology piece, I just wanted to kind of comment on that. You mentioned that mix of, the AI, being able to kind of recognize those intricacies and have the vendor set up and then have it work from there, which I think is a really core tenet of OpenEnvoy, is that, because we're leveraging AI, because we're trying to, be much smarter and way light years ahead of, the OCR technology that's been used in the past, we're able to do that quick turnaround time, have speed as well as quality with it. But then we do have that backup of humans reviewing, because there are, like you said, there's 30 or 40 new vendors each month, and there's, the intricacies that come along with, I know for one example, like when spots air, sometimes there's a minute off, and, if it completely goes through AI, you might not see those things, but that's the type of detail that we've been able to train our technology on through your onboarding process. So I just wanted to kind of comment on that technology piece of what that combination of AI and humans is at OpenEnvoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so on the onboarding process, like we think about 4 phases, discovery, training, then automation and growth. And I kind of touched on a little bit of that there, but where would you say in those 4 steps that Bliss is on this journey now?
I'm sorry, repeat those one more time.
Yeah, discovery, training, automation, and growth.
Gotcha.
You didn't know you were going to have multiple choice questions.
I should have studied my homework. We are definitely in we're in the thick of it, in the training phase. And so I'd say we're probably 70 to 75% for most of our vendors in the automation phase, where they're consistent, they have the data we need, and they're locked in. For the remaining ones, there's still the training phase where still kind of working out the kinks. And this is no dig against OpenEnvoy. We have, as we are in the advertising space, some of our advertisers are, or some of our networks, vendors, are, let's say TV stations. So they've been doing the same thing since the advent of TV. And so they may not have the required fields and information that are necessary to code invoices or code bills. And so as we kind of work through those, we're learning both about how to work with vendors in antiquated systems and what we can do about that to move forward together.
Absolutely. I think in CS in general, the transition from training to automation it's where the rubber meets the road. Like, the discovery phase is all about listening and learning from the customer and making sure we're understanding, what you're looking for. And then training is bringing it to life. But when we want to turn it over to the automation stage, that's where it really all has to come together. So I agree with you that we're in the thick of it at the moment and making tremendous progress. It's been It's been exciting to see. Tell me a little bit more about your experience during the discovery phase. And I'm going to admit that I wanted to call out that question specifically because I remember you calling me after you decided to move forward with OpenEnvoy and telling me that one of the reasons was because you felt really listened to. And so having had that experience with you, Matt, I wanted to ask you to share more.
Sure. I cannot tell you how many times I've been sitting in a pitch after talking to the SDR who takes 15, 20 minutes of my time, listens to everything I've said, and then puts a generic PowerPoint in front of me. I'm all but at a point where if someone puts a generic PowerPoint in front of me, we'll end the engagement immediately. And so that is not what you guys did. There were a good number of calls with the SDR. There were a couple calls with, I think, you. And what we saw at the end of it was what we asked for, a presentation addressing Bliss Point's concerns, a presentation talking about the ways in which you would actually be able to solve our problem. And so, back to that ringer you went through, you spent a lot of time with my team going through examples of our processes. And this is even before a contract is signed because, again, you really want to be, or we really wanted to be sure that we were making the right decision moving forward. It's a big financial commitment, but it's also a human capital commitment. I'm sure many people who are listening now have gone through failed or poorly implemented pieces of software, and so it can be really tough. And that you came prepared, answering questions, and did a live demo. We're a webinar, so PowerPoint is okay, but I think live demos really speak to the software and speak to what can be done. So yeah, those are a few of the pieces that went into being impressed with the proof of concept that we went through.
Well, and I'd like to dive into that a little bit further because I feel like it's really, the discovery phase is a partnership. I've worked with customers in every organization I've ever been at where they couldn't necessarily answer questions to be able to help empower us to show them what they need. So there's like a bit of introspection that needs to take place where you discover your own process and look internally at like where the warts are and the issues and, what's going well and what you really need to solve for. A lot of people, by the time they're ready to take on software, are like, it's just painful. I don't know where the pain is, but it's just painful to do this. And if they just tell me that, then there's not, much specificity that I can present. But for you, you really knew. So I wanted to compliment you and your team. Like, you were able to give us the clarity in order to solution for you. So I'd love to hear more about why you think you guys were at that place, or how you did that to be able to, be an informed consumer about your own process.
Ooh, nobody's ever asked me that before. It goes back to what we were talking about with the growth of Bliss Point in general, where if we're not thinking 6 to 12 months ahead, we're way behind. Because if you're addressing problems as they come up, it causes immense amounts of friction, both with customers, with vendors, with employees. And so really taking the time to think about process is what informs that. And that goes back to just having a process for everything, doing it consistently every single time. Every time there's an ad hoc one-off, it creates friction. And when there's friction, there is opportunity for a mistake. And especially in the accounting and finance space. Let's do it the right way. Let's think about the problem. Let's investigate ways to solve it, decide on a path, and move forward. And I take that approach with every single decision to be made. It's not just, how do we solve today's problem, but is this scalable? Will this work for the future? And will this ultimately leave my team and the company in a better place? And it's not easy. Sometimes it's the inclination is to put a Band-Aid on things. But over time and pain, we really try to avoid temporary Band-Aids and instead, again, go back to what's the core process here? What problem are we solving? And is this the best way to think about the problem? I've gotten to the 99th% of completion on something, realized that it just wouldn't work. So you scrap it and start over. Don't throw good time and money after bad. Oh, there's a great phrase. What is it? Don't commit to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it. So being willing to start over is pretty important there.
I love that line. I don't think I've ever heard that before, but man, that's some good advice there, and definitely critical on the automation journey. As we think about the phases that we have coming up, when I outline this for phases, like we've done a lot of discovery and training, and we're looking forward to automation and growth. And yeah, if you spend a lot of time making a mistake and you commit to it, and you automate it, then it's going to be made thousands of times. So that's something that we take pretty seriously as well. So when you look ahead, I mean, you kind of spoke to this already on just the importance that you put on scalability of this process. But, we're trying to get Bliss Point Media in a place where they can actually enjoy the journey and the process they're on from procurement to payment. What do you look forward to? What do you think this could open up for your team?
This was a really important part of selling the implementation. It comes back to human capital and capital, I suppose, because we're in the business of money. But I think we did the math, and at steady state, so if we turn OpenEnvoy on tomorrow and it takes over, we're looking at saving 700 to 800 human employee hours a month. And so that is a lot of resource and a lot of capacity that is theoretically going to be freed up to focus on the next problem at hand. Because once we lock it in, document it, make sure the procedure works, move on to the next one. And so just keeping an eye on the future to continue innovating and growing and scaling without introducing additional opportunities for error, I suppose, is what it comes down to.
Absolutely. 700 to 800 human hours. That's really compelling.
Yes,
thank you.
Sorry, I have one more numbers fact for you. So we are anticipating doing over $1 billion of media in 2022. And so the growth to that, if we don't get a plan in place on the Sooner side and work out the kinks on the Sooner side, that is an awful lot of money and an awful lot of risk to be taking on without a reliable hyperscale process.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, that really speaks to the need for visibility, the need for audit. You know, anytime you have variable cost invoicing, I mean, it sounds so basic, but making sure that what you're paying is what you expected to pay and what the company was planning on, when small errors, when they're on $1 billion in spend, become really big errors really fast.
Sure do.
So I think that kind of shifts over to Naomi.
Well, perfect. Thank you very much. It was such an interesting conversation. I appreciate, Matt, you taking us through this journey and breaking down all of the important considerations along the way and some incredible stats you shared. And congratulations really on the exponential growth. And so this certainly drives home to the point why having this onboarding solution and such a great partner is absolutely critical along the way. So you've both shared some great lessons learned. I'd love to ask each of you before we move into the Q&A, what's kind of one key takeaway from this onboarding journey that you want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. You go ahead, Matt.
Sure. To be patient and thoughtful, and to understand that it is a process, and I mean, you said the word journey, so I'll take that. It is a process and a journey. It's not going to be a, you know, plug and play solution, because there is no plug and play company. So finding a piece of software and a partner that you like working with and are willing to put the time and resources into is really important for success. Because, Sam, like you said, if you reach a point where everything is just bad and you can't articulate what your problems are, nobody's going to be able to solve your problems if you can't tell them what's wrong.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway. And I think my takeaway actually is pretty complementary to that. You know, Naomi mentioned from my bio at the beginning of this call that I started my career in intensive care nursing. And for a long time in my career, I used to sort of leave that out of the conversation because it felt completely unrelated. And I've actually recently started embracing that because I think what it did is instill to my core sort of a superpower of listening. That's all I really did in this process with Matt and the Bliss team is listen really deeply. In the customer success world, we like to call it discovery, but it's just listening. And I think you should really make sure that you, when you're on your vendor selection journey, have somebody who's doing that so that they can point you towards the right part of their software to help solve for what you're specifically looking for. You know, we're on my customer success team at OpenEnvoy, we're focused on making sure our customers achieve the outcome that they're looking for versus just how often are they in the software, how many invoices are they processing. You know, when Matt tells me he's looking to save 700 to 800 human hours per month, you know, I want to make sure that they're utilizing every feature and functionality that we have to do that. And so by listening to what their current process is and all the intricacies of it, we're able to position, here's what your world looked like before OpenEnvoy, and here's what your world will look like now. And that's powerful. So I think you can tell, as Matt mentioned, I mean, my key takeaway is actually Matt did all the talking for me on these components, but it's just about, you can tell during the sales cycle if somebody is really listening, and I think that's critical. That's the first step of the 4 phases of onboarding, so make sure they're getting it right.
Well, thank you both for that, and it segues really good into a question here that we have from the audience. And Matt, love the example you shared about even before you went to contract, the amount of hours OpenEnvoy spent with your team, and they came prepared with a presentation with addressing your pain points and how they could help solve these challenges. So the question here is, you spoke about technology implementation being critical to your decision-making process. Can you share specific questions you ask vendors to provide in advance?
I think it's more about having a conversation. I think it's more about the conversation, because a vendor's got their standard pitch, and if you are a good vendor, you are trying to solve somebody's pain points. So starting there, and a vendor who asks questions is already ahead of the curve, because launching into a sales pitch as someone picks up the phone, you've already lost the attention and probably the sale. So I don't necessarily have unique questions that I ask every vendor. It's more, is the vendor listening to me? Is the vendor solving a problem for me? Because if they're not solving a problem, then why are we on the phone?
Great point. So Matt, how frequently do you and your team communicate with OpenEnvoy?
Right now, we're in the implementation process, in the training and automation stages. So fairly frequently, my entire team is involved and communicating with OpenEnvoy. We are iterating on what works, what doesn't work, how we can solve things together, and getting updates pretty regularly. I'd say at minimum, big updates once a week, and there are daily emails back and forth of everyone working together to solve the problem that we have.
That's perfect. And kind of on that point of everyone working together, and this is truly a team collaborative effort. Who from the team was involved in making the decision to implement this AP automation?
I think it was really the team, because without full commitment and buy-in, I don't think it would be successful. And so ultimately, I was scoping it, I was leading it, but the people currently handling the procure-to-pay cycle were deeply, deeply involved, and I wanted them to be excited about the potential solution. And this was a little bit of fun that we had early on, where the SDR kept trying to loop me into conversations, and I kind of sent him back to my team of staff accountants and said, they're the ones in the weeds every day. They're the ones who can answer your questions. And so without their buy-in, I wouldn't have signed off on the piece of software.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that. Sam, a question for you around what's the feedback loop between your customers and product team?
Yeah, I think, it comes down to helping the customer achieve their goals. Sometimes there's already features and functionality in place that's going to allow them to do that. We do a lot of kind of digging into the exercise I teach my team is the 5 whys or 5 hows, to make sure that we really understand the root of the problem before we put anything towards our development team, to make sure that, if you get into the habit of like the customer saying, I want this box to be red instead of blue, and you're just like, okay, I'll change it, you'll end up making a lot of changes in the product that don't actually result in a better outcome for the customer. So we as customer success take it upon ourselves to make sure we really understand the problem or the outcome that's needed, and then bring that back to our engineering team, kind of scope it into the priorities, and try to work it into our broader roadmap of where we're going as a solution. Because if it solves a major pain point for a current customer, it's also going to work for future customers and prospects that we're working with as well. So we take a really scalable approach to it. We don't do professional services at OpenEnvoy at all. So when it comes to solving a customer's pain point, it's either in the software now, or it's something that we want to and are going to build in the software, or it's something that, when we really dive into those 5 hows, we might have to say, I think this is going to require a bit of a pivot or a process change on your side, and be really open and transparent about that to help make sure that their interactions with the software ultimately get them to their goal.
I think that's wonderful. And then, so you've got, clearly defined goals and, exceeding expectations here and customer experience. If some of the audience is interested, how do you define success plans, for Bliss Point Media and your other customers? If you could break that down a little more.
Absolutely. I love this question. So thank you to whoever in the audience put this in here. Success plans are a really common term in customer success, and I would say customer success is still a budding industry overall. It's been really growing and growing the past 10 years, but 5 years in particular. So yeah, success plans came on the scene, I would say about 5 years ago, and they mean different things to different customer success organizations. I'm very opinionated about them, so I'll try not to go on too much of a soapbox here. But I think that when I'm defining a success plan with a customer, it has to be a clear objective. It has to be about them, not about us, and it has to be have a timeline and measurable. So very basic, like goal setting parameters that a lot of people forget to do. So for Matt, for instance, one of the goals that he said was getting out of his current system of Bill.com mixed with a spreadsheet to transition to OpenEnvoy and save those 700 to 800 man hours that he mentioned before. That's really easy. We can say yes, no, did it happen? It's an outcome or an objective for Bliss Point Media, and the goal is to have that done by the end of our onboarding, so we know when it needs to take place as well. And that's something that I'm going to hold the customer accountable to, and they're going to hold us accountable to back and forth. So if something's coming up where, maybe we need more information from them to be able to progress in our onboarding, I can say, if we want to meet this timeline, this objective that you said, I need this information by this date. And the same thing with them. They're coming back to us and saying, hey, if we want to be able to process our bills on time this month, this is what I need by this time. And so it's that joint accountability that really helps make sure that the success plan is on track. And we usually, with OpenEnvoy and Bliss Point Media, we try to have an objective kind of around each of those parameters that I mentioned before. So operational efficiency being the goal that I just mentioned, visibility and making sure that, they can see everything that's processing through their system, and clear visibility into that $1 billion in spend that Matt mentioned. And the third one being cash flow. Matt made really clear to me that he wants to be able to do more check runs. And that speaks to operational efficiency, but it also speaks to OpenEnvoy has to process this with enough time that they can choose when they want to pay their bills to take advantage of cash flow, early pay discounts, whatever those decisions are. That's why they're the finance team and I'm the customer success team. Like, they get to decide when they want to run their checks. And so when I hear those goals, I want to make sure that they align with OpenEnvoy's value prop. If they told me a goal that was completely outside of that, I would have to give them that feedback and say, OpenEnvoy can't help you with, something completely outside of our space, but making sure that we're, aligned on what Bliss is really looking to get out of this and how they're going to achieve those things with OpenEnvoy is really critical from the beginning. My favorite thing with success plans, and then I'll stop on my soapbox, my favorite thing is when I can actually understand the personal implications of it. And I haven't done that yet with you, Matt. Usually I like to say, if we saved you those man hours, what would you do with your time? Would you take your dog for more walks? What would it mean for you? So I want to ask you here and put you on the spot. with those success criteria, is there any like personal outcome for you where you get a promotion if it goes well, or you get to spend more time with your dog?
I mean, one personal outcome is that we solved a really big problem in the future. So I get to continue, I mean, being in the finance accounting space is kind of like being in IT. When everything works, people say, well, what the heck do you do here? And when something is broken, people say, well, what the heck do you do here? And so this allows us to sleep better at night in the future, knowing that if we get an extra 3,000 bills, you know, the machine's got it covered. So for me personally, no, I don't believe there is a promotion in my future if the implementation is successful, but I'm really most excited for my team. It will free them up to focus more on technical accounting, on new interesting problems, on, you know, signing off earlier to go to happy hour if they feel like it. It's not so much the tangible outcome as the freedom to choose. And so I know, for instance, that my staff accountants who are really in it right now are going to be much happier where they can solve 10 problems instead of 100 every month. And so it's going to be a really nice thing for the team.
Matt, I think that's really I do too. Sorry, I think that's so powerful. And just we've got one more question here, and then I wanted to just move to some kind of closing remarks, but it really ties in nicely to that. So first of all, you know, the attendees, the questions have been great. Thank you so much. They want to congratulate you on Bliss Point Media's tremendous growth. So what, you know, one or two strategic initiatives that your F&A team will now look to focus on with this 700-800 human hours that are saved? You know, we talked about some of the powerful kind of personal things, and obviously it's creating to a much you know, happier career path. But any specific examples you can share on strategic initiatives as a result of these hours saved?
Sure. It frees up time and mental energy to focus and commit to a pretty big one, actually. Earlier in 2021, just about mid-year, Bliss Point Media was acquired by a larger agency called Tenuity. And so 2022 is going to be the year of integration. And so having that mental space and hours, and having the hours in the day to focus on integrating and not having to worry about reconciling bills is going to be pretty neat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been truly a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. And I just, you know, want to turn it over to you, Sam and Matt, for any closing comments. Sam?
Yeah, I'm just, this conversation got me even more excited than I already was for, you know, Bliss Point to really realize the full power of their OpenEnvoy implementation as we roll into completing that here pretty soon. And I have a feeling, Matt, when your team listens to this, if they're listening now, they're thinking, freedom to choose. All right, I'm going to use that one with him. But no, I'm excited about what our partnership together is doing for you guys.
Absolutely, likewise.
Wonderful. And Matt, maybe closing comment here for the audience?
I had fun. Thanks for having me.
That's perfect. Well, I want to thank you both very much, and to our audience, and encourage you to grab that white paper and also connect with Matt and Sam. I've put their information right there on the console, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day wherever you may be based. Stay safe, and thanks again. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.